Hello, Maria. How are you?
Hello, Giotto. Yes, well today. Yep. And you?
I'm good. So today we talk about fetter 2. So we compare, let's say, the classical or the official interpretation with, let's say, my interpretation.
Yes, I'd just like to preface it with the fact that fetters 2 and fetters 3, we normally, in my methodology, and Kevin Shanelek's methodology rather, you do not directly inquire into fetters 2 and 3. So fetters 2 is doubt and perplexity. That is what it is called traditionally. But because it is related to the truth about ourselves and the world around us, usually this fetter goes along with fetter 1. The central, the kingpin, if you like, is the illusion of self, that we have a separate self that we talked about in the last video. And when that illusion cracks or falls away, usually fetters 2 and 3 tumble along with it. So um, basically, it's how we manage. We manage to be presented with the truth about ourselves, but we're not able to take it in. Um, so we exist as a separate and unique being. That's now a foregone conclusion in this belief, or not this belief, but this doubt and perplexity. And so it's like we're just kind of putting in place what we're kind of fixing that. And so it might also feel like we've drawn a line in the sand between what's true and what's not, because we've already pre-decided that there is a self, as it were, and we're trying to kind of consolidate that. So we've kind of, in essence, developed a defense mechanism um, for whatever life might provide that doesn't agree with us. And so it's also linked to how we identify with our likes and dislikes, our preferences. We've kind of decided this is what we like, what we don't like, and that is part of who we are. And it's almost like we can defend against or choose not to see anything that contradicts that reality. So that's, in a nutshell, how I would describe doubt from the classical point of view.
Okay, so just a little bit before I start with, let's say, my interpretation, I want to discuss a few things with you about this second fetter. So I remember when I was just starting, and by the way, I want to stress I'm not an expert in Buddhism. But of course, I had some interest in it. So when I started researching, I remember I went on Wikipedia and I searched like the 10 fetters, and second fetter was called doubt. And I thought and I think there was like maybe it's just one. There was really little, and it was like second fetter to doubt, and it was some description like doubt in the teachings of Buddha, something like this. And I thought that's weird. It's like, so it seems like it's kind of dogmatic. So you must believe whatever Buddha say because Buddha said it. You're not allowed to question it. And if you have doubt, that's bad. And then you have to overcome that doubt. And I thought that seems very weird. I mean, it doesn't seem what I signed up for when I
No,
was reading this.
no.
So
Some things
yeah,
definitely get lost in translation, don't they?
yes, we know this story that of course there is a lot of issue with the translation, or maybe even more than the translation. Maybe not only it was poorly translated, but also maybe some other stuff was added or removed. I mean, we don't really know. But anyway, my first approach um, with second fetter was this idea of doubt, and I was like, that's so weird that basically they are telling me you should not doubt because that's the way it feels. It's like you should not doubt, you should believe in the teaching of the Buddha, you should blindly accept, and that's what you need to continue to in order to do the further 8 fetters, you have to believe fully. You cannot doubt, you cannot question. And
Oh,
that's really,
no.
that goes completely against, let's say, my way of thinking, my approach, etc., etc., etc.
No, it's far from the truth, actually. It's not to do with believing in an external teaching. It is to do with very much what it is that you can see to be true, but what you might be blinding yourself to for whatever reason. So, yeah, the doubting mechanism is exactly that. We're exposed to the truth all the time. Life is providing what it is, if you like, and with this illusion, it's more like we rather than taking that in, we're deflecting we're deflecting it and resisting it. It's as if we're no longer receptive to what is true anymore. Um, but that's not that we're not receptive to a particular set of teachings, or that we have to follow a particular set of beliefs and believe that that's true. That's almost the opposite. That's more like the next fetter, which is dependence on rites and rituals. Um, and, feeling like identification with our spiritual practice, for example.
But so how do you know when something is true? Because you say so. If I understood correctly, what you're saying is you say the doubt is that when we see something that is obviously true, we doubt. But how do we know that something is obviously true?
So yeah, it's less so much, it's less that we basically are, there is an obvious truth and we're resisting or deflecting it, but it's like we've already concluded what reality is. It's more the opposite. It was like we're very sure that what we believe is true. If Does that help? Maybe that angle is more relatable for you. Um, so it's as if we've drawn a line in the sand. We've pre-decided what is true, and therefore anything that contradicts that, we're not open to it anymore with the second fetter in place. Um, and it can feel as though we've got some ability almost to resist and deflect any contradictory information that comes into play. Uh, does that? Can you relate to that?
Yes, so maybe I will use the, instead of the word truth, I think we could replace it with the word evidence. So maybe, like when presented with evidence, we choose basically to still believe what we believed before. So let's say I believe in Santa Claus
Right.
and I receive evidence that Santa Claus does not exist,
Yeah.
but I say, no, 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 it must exist. So it's basically more about ignoring the evidence. So we
Okay.
could say it's an attachment to our beliefs.
Yes.
And so we are so attached to the belief that we are going to ignore the evidence that comes to us.
Yes, I think that's actually a rather beautifully clear way of putting it. So better than mine. Mine was a bit all over the shop, but yes.
So the way I'm going to try to explain it now, and maybe in this case it matched perfectly. It's not that every single time my version or my interpretation has to be different than the classical one. Sometimes it can be the same. So in this case, I will say that yes, I think there is an issue that most people have, and it's I will say the idea to be attached or to fall in love, we can say, with our ideas or our beliefs. It's kind of the idea of, maybe I think the word ideology represents that, like the way you wish things to be. So ideology is not about trying to investigate how things actually are, which I think will be pragmatism. I'm not sure, but I guess it will be like pragmatism. So the curiosity, the investigation, the desire to find out how things actually are. But ideology instead is you kind of want things to be that way. You have already decided that things must be that way. And so you're going to reject any evidence to the contrary, and you're going to take any evidence in favor. So it's very biased. It's an extreme bias where you're going to, you have your belief, you have your attachment to your belief, you have fallen in love with your belief, and you're going to reject any form of evidence that goes against. So doubt, I mean, if we really want to use the word doubt, I'm not even sure if we need to, but let me just try to think. So maybe it could be doubt. Well, it depends if we want to see doubt in a positive or negative way, but we could say that, we could say that, um, so in a positive way, it will be that you doubt your ideas. So, and in a negative way, it will be that you do not doubt the evidence, because you can actually pick which side. It's like either it's something is wrong with doubt, or doubt is good in quotes. So it's like, so we have to specify. So basically the idea will be, doubt will be a positive force when you are doubting your ideas and your beliefs, and doubt will be a negative force when you're doubting the evidence, in order to keep those ideas that you kind of already pre-decided, as you say, that you want to keep.
Well, maybe it should be renamed bias instead of doubt. That would, I'd go with that. I mean, it's a bit. I think that doubt, in the negative sense, if as we're defining two different ways of, I get your one, which is that it's great to question, what you believe. That's part of where it can be extremely a positive thing, but where it becomes a kind of blind spot, I think, is when doubt acts like in modern terms, an algorithm, where all you will be presented with is what you already believe in. And you will, and actually, the more that happens, the less open you would be to a differing perspective, a differing viewpoint, a differing reality, you could say, because you've narrowed it down to a very particular bias.
I think bias is a good way to describe it, in the sense that the bias, I'm not sure exactly what the word bias means, but yeah, it probably means you're not neutral in your observation and your judgment and your interpretation. So if you have basically, we have a bias towards, I would say, preserving our current idea and belief. So we feel like we want to defend our current ideas and beliefs, and so even when presented with evidence, we kind of tend to reject. So we doubt the evidence in favor of the belief, and we do not doubt the beliefs, whereas we should do the opposite. So we should probably not doubt. I mean, we can always doubt a little bit, but there should be minimal doubt versus the in favor of the evidence, and extreme doubt in favor of our ideas and beliefs. But most people do the opposite. So they fall in love so much uh, with their ideas, that even in front of contrary evidence, they will still try to. They will try. I think another word that is important is the word rationalize. Because I think this is the tool that is being used. So the justification, the rationalization. So we are going to kind of make up a story to try to preserve our idea. So it's like, even in front of evidence that our idea is wrong, that our belief is wrong, that it doesn't work, it's contradictory, we are going to distort reality completely in order to preserve it. So we are going to find crazy justifications in order to preserve our original ideas.
Right, that's it. I mean, actually, that's a great elaboration. I mean, I'm also struck. I want to come back to that because I think that is a very rationalization is a big part of it. That's part of what can feel like our ability to defend and deflect. Um, and it's amazing how the human ability to come up with quite creative rationalizations almost immediately when, it's something that contradicts what we want to believe. But I'm struck by how strong your language is when you say, oh, it's almost like we fall in love, fall in love with a belief. Is that how you define an ideology then? Or I'm just curious about that.
I guess, I mean, an ideology means that you have already, as you say, pre-decided that this is right. And so there is no point investigating further. Like, think, for example, let's say, I don't know, communism versus socialism versus capitalism. Those sciences, like a communist is not going to investigate, let's say, capitalism, and a capitalist is not going to investigate communism. It's not a comparison. They will just stay in their own box, in their own science, and just say why it's the best. This is a superficial example. It can apply to many things, but the idea is, in the ideology, we don't really care if something is true or false. We have already decided that this is right and everything else is wrong. And so the debate is more like how to implement it, what is the best way to do it. But we stop questioning. We stop saying, is communist the right thing? Is capitalism the right thing? we stop questioning. Same for religions, you can say. So it's like we stop questioning uh, if it's right or wrong, if it makes sense or if it doesn't, and we just go in what we should do. There is an example I want to make. It's an example I thought about recently, and it's about Santa Claus. It's a very typical example, Santa Claus in this kind of in this line of work. Let's say we talk often about Santa Claus.
We do.
Um, so Santa Claus, the idea is this: it's like I was trying to find a way to express the difference between, let's say, a realization, which is usually a change in perspective, versus, let's say, going from point A to point B. And let me give you the example. I will explain you this example, so because I think it's interesting. So the example is this. So it's like there are two ways, let's say, to address Santa Claus, the issue of Santa Claus. The first one is to say, for example, does Santa Claus exist or not? So to look at potential contradictions. So let's say I say, okay, Santa Claus came into the house and brought gifts, but the door was locked, the windows were closed, there is no chimney. Because maybe a few hundred years ago, when chimneys were common, that was different. You could argue it came from the chimney. But today, there is no chimney, so the houses are locked. So how did he enter? It doesn't make sense. Now, especially let's say that even more than that, you notice your parents buying gifts and wrapping paper and more contradictions. Let's say, for example, you notice that the language on the box of the toys, the language is always in your home country. So if you are in, I don't know, in Germany, it's in German. In England, it's in English. But shouldn't they come from the North Pole? I mean, it's kind of weird. So in this case, let's say you could have a realization, and you could say this makes no sense. It's contradictory. It's probably false. And now, but something important happened, because when you have the realization that Santa Claus is not real, this produced a deep change in perspective, because it's not just about Santa Claus, but it's about what going from existence of Santa Claus to non-existence of Santa Claus implies. And the implication is that before you believed that there was an omniscient being, there was that the world, included, the universe included an omniscient being that was always observing you to determine if to give you gifts or not. Once you remove the belief of Santa Claus, then you could start to say, well, not only Santa Claus is not that omniscient being, but maybe there is no such omniscient being that is always watching you to judge you, to give you punishments and rewards. So it's an important shift in perspective. The realization that Santa Claus does not exist is not just that, oh, Santa Claus doesn't exist, but it's more, you even question you start to question in general the idea that maybe there isn't, because before you thought that there was at least one omniscient being always observing you, which is Santa Claus. There could be more, but there was at least one. But now you remove that one. So now the question is, so are there any omniscient being that can watch us, or there are none? So it's a profound shift in perspective, because now the idea of omniscient beings watching you all the time to reward or punish disappear.
Yes. No, it's true. The implications go very deep there, don't they? Possibly into your religious beliefs and everything.
Now let's look at the other example. So the example where you do not have the realization and the shift in perspective does not happen, but still, I think it's how a lot of people approach the world. I will just give the example because it's easier with the example. So the thing is, so one way is to realize that Santa Claus probably does not exist, and then question everything, including the existence of omniscient beings watching you. Whereas the other approach would be, instead of questioning Santa Claus, so it's the idea. So one was the idea of the realization and the shift in perspective, versus the idea of, let's say, going from point A to point B, or the idea of evolution or growth or progression. And this will be, so it will be within the system. And in the example of Santa Claus, it will be you asking the question, how can I be a good boy so that I can get more gifts? So do you see, those are two different ways. So one way is to to question, let's say, the paradigm, to question the framework, to question your view of the world, to say, well, it doesn't make sense. Probably Santa Claus does not exist. And so maybe there is no, not only that Santa Claus is not an omniscient being that is always watching me, maybe there is no omniscient being that is always watching me. That's one way of doing it. Whereas the other way, because people, they talk about, let's say, in quotes, spiritual growth or stuff like this. And the thing is, often this idea of spiritual growth is within the system, is growing within the system, is going from point A to point B within the system. So there is no questioning. So it's within the ideology, you see. So you already have your belief. You are not changing your belief, but you are, let's say, you're in quotes evolving. Of course, it's not an evolution. You're just digging a bigger hole, I will say. But it's like,
Right. Well, it kind of gets at the whole self-development model, doesn't it? The irony being that, if you believe in the evolution of self or the higher self, or you're actually trying to make a better self. It's a bit like the little boy who's saying, well, if I'm really good for X amount of weeks, maybe I'll get a better present from Santa Claus. It's kind of on that level, isn't it? Well, but yes, it's not even questioning whether there is a Santa Claus on the part of the little boy or girl, and on the part of the spiritual aspirant, it maybe isn't, not ever questioning whether there is really a self to develop, and or indeed an authority who can look over you and tell you whether you've developed enough, as it were, as a self.
yeah, I think it's the difference between the idea of, on one hand, is like questioning if there is this self or not. And that's one approach. And that's the approach that both me and you, I think, follow. So to question, is there a self or isn't there a self? Let's find out. As opposed to the other approach, which is, of course, there is a self. Let's grow it. Let's develop. Let's evolve it. And so this becomes, let's say, evolving in quotes, or moving, growing, whatever word, within the framework. So in one case, you question the framework. In one case, you question your vision of the world. In the other case, instead, you just, I would say, dig a deeper hole. So it's like, if before you believed in a self, now you believe more, because now you do practices, stuff, and to develop yourself, to grow yourself, to make yourself more spiritual. And this falls into the idea of what's called like the ego trap, the spiritual ego. So in reality, it's worse. So you're digging a bigger hole. So because, let's say again, Santa Claus, to go back to the example of Santa Claus. So one thing is questioning Santa Claus. Another thing is to say, so initially you believe in Santa Claus, but then to go from just believing but not caring to believing and saying, what should I do to get more gifts? So you are going even deeper into the belief, you see. So I think this is the big thing. I think that some people, the ideology is that you have already decided what is true, and your goal is to to grow, let's say, within the ideology. So it's, let's say, whether it's communism or capitalism or a religion or whatever, a set of beliefs that you have already decided are true with zero investigation. You assume they are true, you cherish them, you fall in love with those beliefs that you are certain are true, you never question them, and you just try to evolve within those beliefs. So you will just try, how can I be a better communist? How can I be a better capitalist? How can I be a better Christian? Or can I be a better whatever religion? And again, it's not a criticism against religion. I'm just using it as an example where um, where one really choose the set of belief before everything else. So it's not the result of some research. It's not that they say, I spent a lot of time researching, and let's say I find out that this religion is true, which, I mean, maybe it's the case. I don't know. It could be. Maybe there are 100 religions and someone is going to research a lot and say, I pick religion 52. Why not? But here is more like, you start already, okay, this is the right belief, this is the right idea, it must be true no matter what. Let's evolve, let's grow, let's become a better person within this set of beliefs, and never question it.
Well, yeah, I like your definition of, or your what you say about it, in a way, these of about digging a bigger hole, a deeper hole, or something like that. You said, um, is I think it does come back to identification as well. If you have that central, belief of a self at the center of it all, um, or Santa Claus at the center of wherever he lives, then everything else has to be rationalized around that. And but it's also we become identified with what our preferences are, whether that's for communism, Santa Claus, religion 52, or whatever. So we also identify with those preferences, and well, we'll talk about it more next week of the third fetter, where we identify with our habitual actions as well. So whatever our daily rituals are, it doesn't have to be spiritual rituals. It could just be, well, I am what I do. You've become self-identified with action as well. So um yeah, we the third fetter describes how we identify with our day-to-day actions as well. But with the second fetter, it's a lot to do with our preferences. It's a lot to do with likes and dislikes, which we then identified with and consolidated into this. Um, yeah, it's a big hole, a big hole of self belief. I am what I feel. I prefer, and I am what I do.
I think there is also this element because you use the word preference, and I think I agree. It's like, it's like saying it's true because I want it to be true. It's true because I that's what I wish was true. So I wish Santa Claus were true. So it must be true. I wish, let's say that, for example, some religion has a very nice description of heaven, and I believe I'm a good guy because, of course, there is heaven and hell. So if you're a bad guy, you say, no, it's not true. But let's say you are, in quotes, a good guy, and there is some religion that has a very nice description of heaven, and you believe you're a good guy, so you're sure you will go to heaven, and you say, well, it must be true. It must be true because I want to go to heaven, and that heaven is really nice, and I believe I'm a good guy, so I deserve to go, so it must be true. And so it really become that what things are true because we want them to be true, and things are false because we want them to be false, and we are never able to question objectively or with neutrality. We just already decide that what we want is true, and that's it.
Yeah. No, it's true, and people will defend, what they've decided is true. It's like with great ferocity sometimes as well. So that kind of ties back to what you were saying about being in love with your beliefs, and I think it is tied to preference. And I really want this to be true, and I think that people who are very successful, sometimes politicians or religious um, teachers, if they're not very well motivated, or just themselves self motivated, let's say, can be very good at manipulating other people's preferences. They can say what people want to hear, or they're very clever at saying, expressing things in such a way that people, oh yes, I can relate to that. You know, and so truths can be completely distorted by preference in that way.
Yes, I think at the end, in some way, like, ideology is what is, I mean, is telling people what they want to hear. So let's say someone is very poor and his life is a struggle. You sell him the promise of socialism, and he will say that's great. And someone is rich and he has lots of money, and you sell him the promise of capitalism. Capitalism will solve everything, and probably neither is true. I mean, I guess maybe there is something in between. I'm not even sure. I'm not an expert in politics, but I guess neither model is perfect. But it becomes ideology. So instead of being pragmatic and try to always say what is working, what is effective, it becomes ideology. So it becomes, what do you prefer, and you stick with what you prefer, and then what you prefer must be true at all costs.
It also buys in with the idea that there is a truth to be known, isn't there? There is a sort of, oh, no, I can be certain of that. I can, I can be certain of something, because you might originally, when you take on an ideology, you might actually be open to new ideas at that point. But then if you really click with an ideology and it seems to kind of affirm everything that you believe, and build on that, then you could decide, right, this is it now, and I'm going to close off all other avenues, all other options.
Yeah, if you like it, then you hold it.
Yeah. And it can be very enticing. I mean, I think that's why I quite liked your phrase. It's like people can really fall in love with their ideology, with their beliefs, with their, yeah. It's a strong. I think it can be a very, very strong fixation and place where people can get very stuck.
Yes, yes, yes. Anything else you want to add regarding Feather 2?
I think not. I think that covers it really. Yeah.
Okay, so then next time we do Feather 3 then.
Right. Okay. Good. I look forward to that.
Okay,
Yeah.